right, welcome to the SnydeReport podcast. I am your host, Gary Snyder. Before we get to our guest today, we need to thank our sponsors. First up is Robin Winston, great Hoosier, great sponsor of both the podcast and our newsletter that reaches over 100,000 daily, the SnydeReport newsletter. And also Jill Long Thompson, former Congresswoman. She has her new book out. I guess it's been out for a little bit now, but Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America. So joining us today is Nocona Canady-Flatt. Did I get that right?
You got it right.
Yes. And if I mess this one up, I'm just going to quit. Josh Lowry.
Hey, Gary. Good to see you.
Well, we thought we would have you guys on today because the is that your dog?
Yeah, he's the star of the family.
You know, we had 3 Great Danes running around our house at one point, so we're down to 1.
Yep.
We're gonna make him a star.
He likes the camera. Look over here, Ollie. Ollie, look at the camera.
But you both of you were at the Victoria Spartz shit show, I would call it. Am I getting that right? Now, before I get going, a lot of people were saying, well, give her credit. She showed up. A lot of Congress people wouldn't. And, my argument is, yes, she showed up, but I think she was wanting exactly what she got. Am I wrong?
I congratulated her on some different media for showing up. I think that's better than sending donuts, like some other representation we've had has done. But it's kind of one of those things when you get called to the principal's office or your boss's office, you show up. So it's not a high bar to meet. And I'm glad she came. I think she might have been a little surprised by the turnout and how many people were really quite angry with her and her job performance.
Josh, anything to add on that?
Look, first off, I think you're right. I think she wanted that reaction. She's going to be able to use that booing to raise money, but I'm really not that impressed. Most Americans show up to their job every day. So the fact that she's doing the bare minimum kind of is just what should be done.
Now, when the event you guys were outside protesting beforehand too. Is that correct? I think I saw a video of you, at least Josh, out there.
So there was a long line to get in. Nocona was actually able to get inside. I was with all the protesters that stayed outside the whole time. They reached capacity, and some of the people that had been in line to get inside joined us protesters. And so we joined forces there, but there was both. I mean, it was full capacity inside and quite a few of us outside.
Well, let's talk about the atmosphere outside before we get to Nocona inside. So again, Josh Lowry, you are the chairman of the Hamilton County Democrat Party, correct?
Yes.
All right. So talk about the atmosphere outside before this thing even got started.
I can't tell you, Gary. This is kind of crazy to me. So I've lived in Westfield now 16 or 17 years. My wife has always lived here. And if I remember correctly, this was the area that Hamilton County was called the reddest county in America at one point. So just the fact that we've gotten to parity in voting is, kind of mind-blowing in itself. But I would have never thought that you would have seen a Republican member of Congress being protested in Hamilton County, let alone Westfield. And it was wild. I mean, you had so many people there for different reasons. There were a lot of Ukraine flags. There were a lot of VA benefit signs, a lot of veterans, a lot of people scared about Social Security, you name it. And there was somebody that was bothered by it. And so she has been able to impressively piss off everyone at the same time.
Nocona, you were actually inside when the event started. Just from what I have seen, it didn't take this very long to go off the rails.
No, so I was there around 3:00. I was number 52 in line, and people were already fired up long before she thought about getting close to the event. I would say pretty much from the moment she opened her mouth, people were letting her know that they weren't happy to be there. They weren't happy she was there, and that they were very angry with her. She kept talking about wanting to make things a conversation and how if we'd only be quiet and listen, we could have a conversation. But the conversation has to go from both directions. We've got to be able to talk and have honest answers. And that was not something that seemed to be on display, even from the graphics that were up on the screen when we walked into the room and the flyers and news articles that were handed out in the room. None of that was on par with the answers we came there for or needed or wanted.
Now, how do I put this without sounding insensitive? I've seen her on video, and it is literally a word salad of enormous. I mean, I don't even know what to call it. It's really hard to understand what the hell she's saying, I guess is the nice way to put it.
Yeah. She made sure to blame a lot of people. Or was blamed for Clinton was brought up, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, any Democrat that has probably held office, Jimmy Carter and down. She made sure to include in what I would consider a blame game a lot of praise towards Trump and Elon and Doge, and then some flat out just, he's not going to cover that. When we talked about Social Security, Trump's not going to deal with that. Why not?
You know, when we take a look at what Doge and Elon Musk, President Musk and Donald Trump are doing right now, you know, Medicaid seems to be on the chopping block. I don't know the Medicaid figures for Hamilton County because it's one of the more affluent counties in the state. But I know up here where I'm at in Huntington County and a lot of rural counties, Medicaid seems to be at the forefront of a lot of fights, both at the national level and the state level. Did she address the Medicaid issue at all?
I think address is a strong word. Was it a question that was asked of her? Yes. Did we get an answer about it? No. A lot of, well, we're going to take care of the seniors. We're going to take care of people with disabilities. But a lot of, well, we want to be physically responsible. Okay. On surface, that all sounds really good. But what's being done is complete opposite to that. So we're seeing a disconnect of where that meets up. You can't take care of seniors and balance the budget and then also say Trump's not going to talk about this. He's not going to deal with this. It doesn't work out that way.
And Gary, when you talk about Medicaid, I understand in Hamilton County there might not be as many people on it because of income reasons, although there are still some. But we saw over the last, I guess it was a year or two ago, when they stopped providing services for children with medically complex issues. And we found out because of that there's a lot of families that have kids with chronic illnesses that maybe they do make a decent income, but because of the healthcare expenses, it's put them in a place where they can't afford it, that they have to have that Medicaid assistance. Like an example is I could tell you, I'm a foster parent. And at one point, one of our foster children was autistic. I guess still is autistic, but that's something that Medicaid covers when they're in the foster system. We got approved for services and they just said there's a waiting list because that's one of the ways they control the expenses is to just cap the number. And so you got families with kids with autism, medically complex needs, all kinds of medical issues that the kid has that the parents need that help. And that's the kind of stuff that's on the chopping block. I think a lot of people hear this and their mind goes straight to, oh, it's somebody on Medicaid that doesn't have a job. No, there's a lot of people with jobs that not only are they working, but they're dealing with kids that have extreme medical issues, and no one would be able to afford that out of pocket.
And I think one thing people need to realize when it comes to Medicaid, Medicaid is responsible for 60 to 70% of all seniors in nursing homes and assisted care. 41% of all births in Indiana are through Medicaid. So when you talk about Medicaid, you're not talking about the lazy, no good, nothing that don't work to get health care, which is completely false. You're talking about 41% of the mothers and children born in Indiana every year. You're talking about 60 to 70% of seniors in assisted living facilities.
And I think another piece of that is when we're talking about these seniors and these families, I'm a therapist by trade. This is what I study and research is families and how we interact and how the individual interacts in the world. When you're putting all of these burdens on families, it impacts their mental health. It impacts their ability to go to work every day, to put food on the table. So it becomes a matter of survival. And that's what we're talking about. It's not just, oh, I might not be able to afford a luxury item. It's, I can't survive. My system is so overtaxed with just trying to get basic care that I think Representative Spartz is trying to simplify the issue in that this isn't just, I couldn't go to the doctor today. This is families' livelihoods, and this expands across generations, because who takes care of those seniors who can't afford to pay for their nursing home anymore? That's going to fall onto their kids and their families.
Victoria Spartz has not had the reputation of being the most reputable person out there. You know, you can go back to I'm not running again, to I'm not voting for any Republican for leadership. I'm not going to join any committees. Were you shocked that she actually showed up?
So talking to people beforehand, I said, well, at least she's going to come, I guess. And a lot of people said, well, let's wait and see.
Yeah.
So I guess, yes, if the bar's really, really low, I'm excited she lifted her foot and stepped over it. Again, it's not that impressive to come and do your job.
Josh?
Yeah, she. I mean, I guess I don't even want to say to her credit, because again, that's the bare minimum of her job. But she has a decent track history of showing up over time. I mean, I'll be honest, I've met her at some things, and she says absolute nonsense when I talk to her, but she goes around. I think the bigger problem is that when she's not at these events, she's never at any other time with people that are going through real issues. You know what I mean? Like I really think when I hear the way that because I mean, we were streaming it out there and we could hear it and we were chanting in from the outside. And when you hear her talk about things like Medicaid, like frankly, she doesn't give a shit about people on Medicaid, because no one she knows
Well,
is on
you could have
Medicaid.
just stopped at she doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, yeah. You really, I mean, I think the most out of all the crazy stuff that's happening with this administration and this Congress, I think the most telling thing was when the Commerce Secretary talked about his mother not noticing what it'd be like to miss a Social Security paycheck. More than half of the country lives paycheck to paycheck. I know all of us here in Indiana, if we aren't living paycheck to paycheck, we know someone that is. I remember when I ran for office last year, going through some income adjusted housing in Sheridan. And several of the people there were telling me they didn't know what they were going to do because the utility rates keep going up, but their Social Security payments weren't going up. Victoria Spartz doesn't know anybody like that. She doesn't know somebody on a fixed income. She doesn't know somebody living in income adjusted housing. She doesn't know anybody that lives on Medicaid. And so to her, that's just a character in a movie, and she doesn't really care what happens.
Inside, there were a lot of questions asked. I mean, you don't have to look at very many media reports that she was booed. She was, she was yelled at. Did she answer any questions? Because looking at some of the video of the event, they asked her, I did see where she said that people aren't due process if they're arrested, that she's not going to vote for any budget that has a deficit, which we know is not true. She will. You can pretty much take what she says, do the opposite, and that's what she's going to do, period. So were there any answers that she gave last night that you may not agree with them, but you were satisfied that she answered the question?
So, no. I did get my question chosen. I was one of the few that got theirs chosen.
What was your question?
Mine was relating to farmers in Indiana and how what she's basically doing to stop the cuts to USAID, USDA, Department of Education, and the tariffs that have come in and impacted farmers. They're not the main crux of those issues, but they sell their goods overseas or use them for school lunches, or their products are now going to have a tariff attached. And that's going to impact Indiana. It's going to impact these rural areas where we're already seeing struggle occurring. And the most clear takeaway from the response was, I think she invited me to be a part of a committee to talk with her about farming.
You
So I'd
think?
like- I
Wasn't clear?
She said she was, and I kept saying, "Okay, invite me. I'll be there." So we'll see.
Yet.
Yeah. And then her first answer was she's actually a farmer. She writes the checks for farmers. And I don't know about everyone, but I grew up on a farm and we weren't doing a lot of check writing. We were doing a whole lot more hay hauling and working with the animals, and not so much on the check writing of a 1,000+ acres. And that was the takeaway from my question. And that was kind of how it was for every answer. Hey, you asked something. Here's how I think I can relate to it. But the relation was so off base, like watching a movie, like Josh said.
Mhm.
And she when she says that, it reminds me, you remember when Mitt Romney was trying to show how relatable he was by saying that he knows some owners of some NASCAR teams? He did never watch NASCAR, but he knows some owners. I did notice the most clear answer she gave actually last night, though, was that she did not think Pete Hegseth should be fired for, giving away attack plans on Signal. So that was one time she did give a clear answer, I guess. Stupid answer, but clear answer.
Does she give anything other than stupid answers? I mean, seriously, you can ask her any question. She's gonna basically toe the talking points. Because I know when I ran for Congress against Jim Banks 3 years ago, we did one debate. He would do it on the local right-wing fascist radio station here in Fort Wayne with the same right-wing fascist radio show hosts. One thing that I found is that once you get past his initial talking point, there's nothing else there. Did you get that from Victoria Spartz?
This was my first time seeing her, hearing her speak. I just moved to Indiana in July. And since she's not on committees and she doesn't do interviews, and I haven't seen her on television or talking, she really hasn't been on my radar. So all of it was new for me. And I'm not going to lie, the first few minutes, I was like, you have got to be kidding me. Not so much surprised, but just like, really? You spent this time, you came down here, you had to get on a plane, you had to drive out here, and this is what we're going with. Because the first few minutes, I said on my personal Facebook, I said, we're just being lectured to. There was a lot of, let me explain how government works. And several times in the crowd, people screamed out things like, we're not as stupid as you think we are. Because there were several times where it was, well, let me explain to you how the world works. When these are the people that are living day to day with the choices she gets to make in her lifestyle living in DC.
I had John Fugelsang on. If you don't know John Fugelsang, he's on the XM satellite radio progressive station not too long ago. A stand-up comedian, very funny guy. And he said with Trump and Vance in the Republican Congress and Victoria Spartz, and I'm just going to warn you here, I am going to drop an F-bomb. So if your ears don't like to hear that, just beware. He said that you got to beware of the what the fuck isms, that they will throw so many of those out there that will catch your attention. And then while you're paying attention to those, they're doing the sleight of hand and firing workers or cutting Social Security with the other hand. Do you see that with her?
So I definitely think that's the overall goal of the Trump administration, right? Like Trump is over here doing shit about due process and just horrible stuff to people, while Doge is going through and chopping out the federal government like we've never seen before. And so it's almost like it's hard to focus on both attacks. I think that's something like Jim Banks is trying to do. I'll be honest, when I've heard Victoria talk, Representative Spartz talk, or I have met her, I have no idea what the internal consistency is for her or what there is, right? Like, I think that video of Jim Banks sending the donuts and then talking shit about his own voters is representative of who Jim Banks really is, right? If you're not on his side, he doesn't think you deserve to talk to him. There's a literal disdain for people there. JD Vance is a scumbag that'll say anything to get him anywhere in power, right? There's at least something there. It's horrible, but there's something. Spartz has been so all over the place on so many things that I don't even know if it's intentional, right? Like, don't get me wrong, she's making us say what the fuck a lot, but I think a lot of that may just be the random mood that she's happens to be in or whatever she decides to say at that time. I don't want to give her too much credit on that. She's trying to distract us on one side while we're doing something over here.
How about you, Nocona?
I feel like that she's part of the game, but she doesn't really know what's happening in the game. Other people are controlling the board. She's there. She's got a little bit of power, but she's not on a level that you see a Jim Banks or that even you see a JD Vance. JD Vance knows what he's doing. He called Trump a Nazi and then now is his vice president. He knows. But I don't think that she has that consciousness either. And if she does, she's not communicating it well to anyone, her side or the opposite side. So I agree with that. I just don't think that she really gets how big she kept saying things last night like, well, there's not a bipartisanship. There's Democrats aren't working with us or things like that.
That's
Again,
because you're doing stupid shit. That's why.
we weren't the ones that started screaming first. We weren't the ones that started throwing tantrums on television first. So it's kind of hard to say, oh, the bipartisan nature that's gone in America is somehow Democrats' fault.
We have to start wrapping things up here, but a quick question for each of you, and then we'll let you close. Does she have a primary challenger in 2 years or next year?
Does Spartz have
Yes.
primary? Yeah, I'm pretty sure Chuck
Goodrich
is already announced. If not, I've seen his name already out as a sponsor on things like Goodrich for Congress. My guess is he's going to drop his life savings, his total worth on this because he feels like he has one more shot. So yeah, I think my guess is they'll circle around one person opposing her and it'll depend on what Trump says because whoever he nominates will win their primary.
Right. Nocona?
I don't know. I know that I hope so. I can't imagine her continuing to be in play. I don't think she's played ball enough to get the support of her own party. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that one. She may decide not to do it. You know, she likes to change her mind left and right.
All right. Anything else you guys wanted to cover about this event that I did not ask you? I'll start with you first, Nocona.
I think that one of the things that people maybe don't think about in Hamilton County or in Indiana as a whole that, and I said this last night, is that Hoosiers care. They care. They're being affected. It's not just the middle of the country and just hanging out and, oh, we're okay with whoever's representing us. There are a lot more blue dots in this red state than people think. And I think that was obvious last night. It was a 500 seat capacity, 150 plus people outside protesting, not to mention countless watching on live streams. So there are people that are not happy with the status quo and the way things are going. And they showed up and they showed out. And I think that's something that Indiana and especially Hamilton County can be really proud of.
Josh?
Yeah, I don't think people can overestimate the importance of protesting and speaking out because I think sometimes people only think about the direct effect they're having on that politician right then, right? Like, I don't think anything that we said or did last night is changing the way Spartz thinks about anything. But what I do think is a lot of people saw that, not just the people there. People were driving by and they saw us. People saw it online. People saw it on the news. And most voters don't pay very close attention. So when something does break through, they're like, why is everybody pissed off about something? And the last 2 times we saw major protests politically in America, 2009, the Tea Party, red wave after that. 2017, after Trump got elected, blue wave after that. So the reason that these protests are so important is it's not just changing what's happening now, it's changing what's happening in the future. And I think it's why we're going to see a blue wave in 2 years.
Well, thank you, both of you, for joining me. Nocona Canady-Flatt.
Yeah.
Did I get it right?
You got it right.
I am
It's a
horrible.
hard one.
Well, just to be fair, I don't get my daughter's names right. So I go through at least, 3 or 4 of them before I get it. And also Hamilton County Democrat Chairman Josh Lowry. Josh, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.
One last shout out to our sponsors. Robin Winston does a great job, has been on board with the newsletter and the podcast from the start, along with Jill Long Thompson and her newest book, Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America. I am Gary Snyder. This is the Side Report, and we are out.